Amanda Nunes is headlining UFC 289 in Canada against Julianna Pena number 3. Now, people have been dumping on this fight, and rightfully so, for it being the main event. But Tom, I'm going to offer this to you. The first fight offered a massive upset, and it was a sloppy brawl. And the second fight was an absolutely bloody battle that Nunes dominated in the end. Like, let's be honest here. If you want blood and guts, if you want to get a finish, this is kind of the fight you want, no? Like, this isn't that bad if you want that sort of entertainment. But if you want refined MMA, you know, Amanda Nunes having to switch stances to run away from a dipping jab, I mean, it's probably not what you're going to get, is it?
Joe, if you want blood and guts, Jon Cutelaba, he's here, he's ready. All right, we can do him versus Ankalaev 3 in Canada. I'm sure they'd love it. All right?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Now, I don't want to dump too hard on Nunes, and I'm not going to.
Right.
What I'm saying is, how does Pena have a title shot? How is that not making a total mockery of the sport? It wasn't close, the last fight. The first one was a total shock and upset. And then the default continued.
Rematch.
It resumed.
Yeah.
You know, the freak upset was ironed out. Nunes moves on. Pena fights 3 or 4 more times. You know, gets her head down. But that's not what's happened. She's straight back in after that loss for another fight. How can you tell me this is a legitimate decision when you're going to make this fight for a third time?
Do the UFC think that Pena's like a sneaky, weird draw with like...
Yes.
You know... Do you reckon that's what it is?
Yes.
But Aldana's Mexican. Why don't you get her in there? You know, you could sell the fourth Mexican champion.
Joe.
The 4 pillars of Mexican MMA.
After our last pod,
Yeah.
we were sharing some post pod recollections, and we did a little game. You remember this one, Joe?
Yes, I remember.
pulled up the official UFC rankings for women's bantamweight, and I asked you to name as many fighters as you could. Now,
How many did I get out of 15?
You just about got to one hand. Maybe you got to a second hand.
I got to 7.
Which was truly admirable, and I think puts you in the pound for pound greatest fans of women's bantamweight. Because I don't know any of these. All right?
I'm the Alexander Volkanovski of women's bantamweight fans.
That's right.
Okay, great.
That's right. And Pena is ultimately known. She's known for that win and nothing else. But she has that, and that's a lot more than the other ladies. So, yeah, what can we say about this division, Joe? It's poor.
Let's talk about men's flyweight. Brandon Moreno has his next title fight set, International Fight Week. Alexandre Pantoja, they faced each other twice before. Pantoja's beaten him twice. I mean, here's Alex Pereira of sorts. I mean, this is banger central. Like, I am... Out of all the fights that I'm going to mention, I think that's the one I'm most excited for.
Yeah, rematch, long time coming. Pantoja's been there. He's been calling for it. He's done everything he's had to do. He's not really getting the push from the UFC, but he deserves it because... He has quite the reel, Joe. You take the time to sit down and watch Pantoja, you're guaranteed some violence.
What's the one where he just like sat in the pocket with your man and just like traded in like inside a round? He got like the guillotine finish. I'll have to bring it up, but yeah, Pantoja, man, he's all action all the time. You know, Moreno is a superb, well-rounded fighter. It was actually the Alex Perez fight. It was an Alex Perez fight. Or inside of like 90 seconds, they were just trading back and forth craziness. Pantoja takes the back and gets the rear naked choke. Pantoja is a beast. We'll break down that fight in greater detail closer to the time. But listeners, I just want you to get excited. That is a superb fight, and I cannot wait for it. Also, speaking of potential superb fights, this hasn't been confirmed yet. Bryce Mitchell was supposed to face Jonathan Pearce at the UFC pay-per-view in a few weeks. Well, he's pulled out Pearce and offering up his skills to face Bryce Mitchell. Movsar Evloev has said, I want the fight. If I'm Bryce Mitchell, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, that's a rough one. After fighting Topuria to then get Evloev. These are the two names that all of us have been looking at coming through the division. And if Bryce Mitchell happens to be on the tracks for the second train coming through, that's pretty unlucky for him. Now, given the psychological state that he was put into by that loss to Topuria, I really think this would be a bad look for him.
I don't think Mitchell could take Evloev down. I don't think he could do it.
I think Bryce Mitchell has a place in our sport, Joe, and I don't think he should fight Evloev in this fight.
Not yet. He shouldn't fight. I mean, if he fought Topuria and Evloev back to back, I would honestly give him a round of applause because no one else would be willing to do that. Whoever fights Topuria is just like, oh, you're facing Evloev next. No, I'm not. But to say yes to both of those guys, like that's insane.
It's not official yet.
Not official yet, no. Evloev has said that he is willing to do it, and Mitchell is in need of an opponent. I just always go back to that Topuria-Mitchell fight where Topuria just pancaked him, just put his hand to his chest and just pushed him down to the mat. Man, poor Bryce Mitchell. But yeah, we saw the limits of Mitchell there, and I don't know if we really need to see it again against Evloev. Speaking of Topuria, seems like he's finally got his fight, and it's going to be Josh Emmett. And again, I'm not feeling it for Mr. Emmett.
Brutal sport, isn't it, Joe?
It's just the way it is. It really
the old make way for the young.
That's how it should be. That's how it should be. If you're gonna go out, like ideally you want to go out in, well, you want to win, but if you're gonna lose, you want to do it with some honor, and you want to do it against a guy who's going to become champion, don't you? Like if you go out and you're like, well, that guy went on to become the champion, and I had a great fight with him. There's no dishonor in that, is there?
Now, hold on. Are you saying that this was the planning from Frankie Edgar's coach for the last stage of his career? If I go out and get smashed by all these fellas, one of them will eventually win the belt, and that.
No. No, I mean, Frankie's head had been so scrambled by that point. I don't even know if he thought he was playing tennis or not. I mean, it was. You know, I don't know if that was his game plan. But again, if you are going to lose to guys, I mean, losing to Topuria is not the worst thing in the world, is it? Like. You know, and Josh Emmett will lose to him. You know, Topuria's got such an arrogance to him that I love. Like, I just love watching just like how arrogant he is. I mean, he's well justified, don't you think?
Yeah, certainly from what we've seen so far.
Right. Let's talk about. We could talk about Bo Nickel versus Treshawn Gore, but that's just Bo Nickel winning. Leon Edwards says he won't fight in July against Colby Covington, but he calls for the fight in Abu Dhabi in October. So there was a potential UFC pay-per-view in London again in July, which I'm guessing will not be a pay-per-view anymore. Tom Aspinall says he's back and ready in training, so you could do an Aspinall main event again. But I'm going to talk about this, Tom. Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz in boxing has been set for August in Texas. Now, I don't care about the fight. Right, but what I am finding interesting now is that this is going to be on DAZN, and it's going to be a DAZN pay-per-view. The first few Jake Paul boxing fights were on Showtime. The last one was on ESPN. And now he's on DAZN, and I think this is showing that perhaps there is a slowing lack of interest. Like there's starting to become a lack of interest in this. And what I find interesting is that Nate Diaz, apparently, he just wants to do one boxing match and then go back to the UFC. And can I just say this, Tom? I don't think the UFC will sign him again unless it's just for that Conor fight.
And I also don't think he wants to fight in the UFC again, Joe. I think it's just the Nate Diaz show. It's part of the game. How long was Nick Diaz teasing a return? And we saw the way he came back. So, yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, you speak to a kind of fading interest in the change of promoter the broadcaster. That's what happens when you lose to Tommy Fury.
Yeah,
the first boxer who's been trained and he boxes you and you can
got no response. Yeah,
I mean that definitely slows the hype. Now we said that this fight probably wouldn't happen, that this fight was dead in the water after that loss to Fury, and that's because. Well, ultimately, it isn't as big a draw as it would have been. You go and beat Tommy Fury, you have your antics with Nate Diaz, and you're going to keep a strong fan base on board. They start to wonder, the sky is the limit. Yeah, no real interest in the fight, and very little interest in how these careers develop, unfortunately. But, I was getting teased. I was getting hooked in a little bit, this whole, potential coming into the PFL. I know all the money behind him, presumably the athleticism to become a fighter. It's intriguing until you lose to Tommy Fury.
Yeah.